The Perennial Scope of Philosophy by Karl Jaspers quotes, "The Perennial Scope of Philosophy by Karl Jaspers examines the enduring nature of philosophy as a quest for meaning that transcends specific doctrines or systems. In this reflective work, Jaspers discusses themes such as philosophical faith, the nature of existence, and the relationship between philosophy and religion, emphasizing that philosophy must remain open-ended, a path of self-inquiry that guides individuals in their search for truth. He advocates for a philosophy rooted in historical consciousness, highlighting the need for openness to transcendental ideas while resisting the lure of rigid dogmas. Through these explorations, Jaspers presents philosophy as a vital and dynamic process that upholds human dignity and freedom." Quote 1. "Philosophy itself would be deprived of its heart, and where a theological atmosphere has prevailed, this has indeed been its lot. Philosophy, when reduced to a mere instrument of theology, loses its essential independence. The text emphasizes that philosophy cannot survive in an environment dominated by religious doctrine, as it would no longer serve its purpose of seeking truth independently, but would instead become subservient to an external system of beliefs, thus robbing it of its intrinsic value." Quote 2. "Faith is a different thing from knowledge. Giordano Bruno believed and Galileo knew." This distinction between belief and knowledge highlights two approaches to truth. Bruno died for his beliefs, rooted in philosophical faith, whereas Galileo retracted his scientifically proven knowledge to save his life. The difference lies in the nature of the truths they upheld. Philosophical faith is deeply personal and historical, while scientific truth stands apart from personal conviction and is universally provable. Quote 3. "Philosophical faith must continually draw upon the primal source within each historical situation. It achieves no rest in a body of doctrine." Philosophical faith, unlike religious or dogmatic faith, is a dynamic process that requires ongoing reflection and openness to new insights. It cannot settle on a fixed set of beliefs or doctrines, but must always engage with the ever-changing conditions of human existence, seeking deeper understanding without finality. Quote 4. "Dialectic means the logical progress through antitheses to a solution in syntheses. Dialectic in philosophy is not just about contradiction, but the resolution of opposites to form a higher understanding. This process reflects the way philosophical thought evolves, constantly moving between opposing ideas to reach deeper truths rather than settling on simplistic conclusions." Quote 5. "Philosophical faith is in tradition. To be sure, this faith exists only in the independent thinking of each individual. It does not offer the shelter of an objective institution. Philosophical faith is deeply rooted in the history of thought, but it is not a passive acceptance of tradition. Each individual must engage independently with these traditions, finding personal meaning and insight, rather than relying on institutions to provide definitive answers or security." Quote 6. "The universality of true faith cannot, however, be formulated as a universally valid statement. It cannot be accepted as immediate or objectively fixed as a product of history. True philosophical faith transcends the boundaries of historical context or rigid formulas. It is not something that can be neatly encapsulated in universal statements or doctrines, but is rather a living, evolving engagement with existence that each thinker must discover in their own way through time." Quote 7. "Faith withdraws to a minimum at the borders of unfaith, and from this infinitesimal point, it reverses the process and spreads anew. At the brink of doubt or disbelief, faith does not collapse, but instead contracts to its most essential core, only to grow and renew itself. This dynamic nature of faith means that it can survive even the deepest skepticism, continuously revitalizing itself from its own depths." Quote 8. "In philosophizing, man breaks through his mere nature, but by virtue of his own inner being. What he thus apprehends as being and as himself, that is his faith. Philosophy is a deeply personal journey, where one transcends ordinary existence by tapping into the depths of their inner self. This process reveals not just knowledge, but also a profound understanding of one's own being, which forms the foundation of their philosophical faith. It is a process of inner awakening, rather than mere intellectual discovery. Quote 9. There can be no object without a subject, but neither can there be a subject without an object. This quote emphasizes the interdependence of subject and object in the process of cognition. Knowledge and experience are bound to this duality, where the existence of objects is reliant on a perceiving subject, and the subject's consciousness is defined by its engagement with objects. It highlights the fundamental structure of human experience, which cannot exist in isolation from the world. Quote 10. Faith is the consciousness of existence in reference to transcendence. Faith, in this context, is more than belief. It is the awareness of one's being in relation to something greater, beyond the limits of the empirical world. This connection to transcendence gives life a deeper significance, anchoring existence in something absolute, which philosophy helps to explore and comprehend. Quote 11. The authentic being, that is neither object nor subject, but that is manifested in the whole of the subject-object dichotomy, and that must fill the categories in order to give them purpose and meaning, we have called the comprehensive. This statement identifies authentic being as something that transcends the duality of subject and object. It exists in a state that encompasses both, unifying them into what Jaspers calls the comprehensive. This concept reflects the ultimate, inseparable reality that underlies all human experience and thought, giving structure and meaning to existence. Quote 12. An absolute imperative has its source within me, in that it sustains me. Neither finite aims nor authority can account for this absolute. The absolute imperative is an inner command, not based on external goals or authority, but emerging from within the individual. It is a guiding force that reflects the true self and its alignment with transcendence. This imperative is unconditioned and foundational, giving moral direction beyond the constraints of worldly motivations. Quote 13. The reality of the world subsists ephemerally between God and existence. The world, as we perceive it, exists in a transient state between the eternal, God, and the finite, existence. This view suggests that the material world is not the ultimate reality, but a fleeting stage where the eternal and temporal intersect. It is through this ephemeral reality that we experience both existence and transcendence. Quote 14. Reason is an indispensable element of philosophical faith. Reason plays a crucial role in philosophical faith, guiding one through the process of seeking truth. It connects various meanings of truth and prevents any single aspect from becoming isolated. Through reason, philosophical faith remains open, dynamic, and continually evolving, allowing for communication and a deeper understanding of existence. Quote 15. Man defined himself first by means of great images, as though he already understood himself. First, he conceived of himself in the hierarchy of the creatures. Throughout history, man has attempted to understand his place in the world by constructing grand images of himself. He initially defined himself through a hierarchical lens, positioning himself between beasts and angels. This reflects humanity's effort to grasp its complex nature, both as a creature of the physical world and as a spiritual being capable of intellectual and divine connection. Quote 16. What really is even without man, even though it appears to us in forms and modes that originate in man. This statement underscores the distinction between the existence of reality and human perception. Reality exists independently of human observation, yet our understanding of it is shaped by the structures of our consciousness. The world does not depend on us for its existence, but we interpret it through our human faculties, creating our own modes of perceiving it. Quote 17. Man's being has been seen in his misery and greatness at once, in his weakness and potentiality, in the mystery of how his opportunities and tasks develop precisely out of his fragility. Man's dual nature is defined by both his vulnerabilities and his extraordinary potential. His greatness often emerges from his fragility, as challenges and limitations give rise to opportunities for growth and action. This paradox of human existence, simultaneously weak and strong, lies at the core of understanding what it means to be human. Quote 18. He becomes for himself the greatest of all mysteries when he senses that despite his finite nature, his possibilities seem to extend into the infinite. Though man is aware of his limitations, he is also conscious of his infinite potential. This awareness creates a mystery at the heart of human existence. How can a finite being, bound by mortality and limitations, still sense that his possibilities reach beyond these constraints? This tension between the finite and the infinite forms a key aspect of human self-awareness. Quote 19. Every insight into man, if it is absolutized into a supposed knowledge of man as a whole, destroys his freedom. This quote suggests that when we try to reduce the complexity of human existence to a singular or total explanation, we lose the essence of what makes humanity free. Man cannot be fully explained by any one theory or system of knowledge, because doing so would negate the inherent openness and potential of human freedom. Quote 20. Man cannot be understood on the basis of evolution from the animals. While scientific knowledge suggests that man evolved from animals, this quote reflects the idea that human existence cannot be fully explained by evolution alone. Man's uniqueness lies beyond the physical or biological in qualities like freedom and consciousness, which transcend what evolution can account for. This perspective insists that human nature involves dimensions that scientific inquiry cannot capture, making man fundamentally different from other creatures. Quote 21. Man's finiteness lies thirdly in the nature of his cognition, in his dependence on the experience that is given him, especially on direct perception. Human knowledge is limited by our finite nature, and we are dependent on direct experience to understand the world. This limitation is intrinsic to human cognition. What we know comes through perception, and thus, we can never fully grasp reality beyond what our senses allow. Our understanding is always mediated by the finite tools we have, and this finiteness is a core characteristic of being human. Quote 22. Through the presence of the absolute and the infinite, man's finiteness does not remain merely the unconscious datum of his empirical existence, but through the light of transcendence, it becomes the basic trait in his consciousness of his created nature. Human awareness of the infinite and the absolute transforms the understanding of our finite nature. Rather than being confined to the limits of empirical existence, man's consciousness is opened to the idea of transcendence, revealing a deeper awareness of his origins and his connection to something beyond the finite. This realization fundamentally changes how humans view their place in the world. Quote 23. Man is always more than he knows about himself. This quote highlights the inherent mystery of human existence. Despite our efforts to understand ourselves through science, philosophy, or introspection, there will always be aspects of our being that remain unknown or unknowable. Human nature cannot be fully captured or defined by any system of knowledge, as there is always something beyond our grasp that defines who we are. Quote 24. All ideals of man are impossible, because man's potentialities are infinite. There can be no perfect man. The pursuit of an ideal human being is fundamentally flawed, because human potential is boundless. Any attempt to create a perfect model of man is destined to fail, as the very nature of humanity involves infinite possibilities. This understanding reveals that ideals are only useful as inspirations for growth, but can never be fully realized in practice. as no person can embody absolute perfection. Quote 25. Philosophy proper, on the other hand, knows no cult, no community led by a priesthood, no existent invested with a sacred character, and set apart from other existence in the world. Philosophy, unlike religion, does not rely on rituals or a specific community of believers. It is not bound by sacred objects or spaces, and does not depend on an organized priesthood. Instead, philosophy exists as a product of individual freedom and inquiry, open to transformation as each person makes it their own. It seeks truth without the social or ritualistic constraints that define religion. Quote 26. Religion is intent upon embodying its truth in tangible symbols. Philosophy pursues only effective subjective certainty. Religion often seeks to represent its truths through physical symbols and rituals that are accessible and shared among a community. Philosophy, however, focuses on achieving personal certainty and understanding through subjective experience. The difference lies in how each system relates to truth. Religion externalizes it in forms that can be collectively experienced, while philosophy internalizes it in the mind of the individual. Quote 27. The prophetic faith is more powerful than the philosophical idea, because it arises from the direct experience of God. The power of prophetic faith comes from its direct encounter with the divine, unlike philosophy, which arises from intellectual abstraction. Prophetic faith engages deeply with the experience of God's presence, making it more emotionally compelling and spiritually potent than the philosophical pursuit of truth through reason and logic. Quote 28. Prayer is individual, existentially present. As a subordinate element of the cult, it is performed by the individual in a fixed form, and then he remains entirely within the sphere of religion. Prayer, though often part of religious ritual, is a deeply personal act. It can exist within structured forms dictated by religious tradition, but at its core, true prayer is an individual experience. When prayer moves beyond religious formulas, it begins to approach the philosophical, as it becomes less about asking something of God and more about personal contemplation and inner transformation. Quote 29. Revelation that is communicated as such must have a mundane form. Once it is stated, it deteriorates into finiteness, and even into trivial rationality. When divine revelation is communicated to humans, it must take on a form that can be understood in the worldly realm. However, in doing so, it loses its infinite transcendent nature and becomes subject to the limitations of human understanding and language. As a result, the original purity of the revelation can be diminished or even distorted when expressed in finite terms. Quote 30. The Bible and biblical religion are a foundation of our philosophy, a lasting orientation, and a source of irreplaceable contents. The Bible has a profound and lasting influence on Western philosophy, serving as a foundational text that provides crucial philosophical ideas and a guiding orientation. Even when philosophy critiques or opposes it, the Bible continues to be an irreplaceable source of wisdom, shaping philosophical thought throughout history. Quote 31. Nowhere is the whole, full, pure truth, because it cannot exist in any sentence of human speech or in any living human figure. This statement highlights the inherent limitations of human language and expression. Absolute truth cannot be fully captured or conveyed through words or any single human representation. All human attempts at articulating truth are partial, reflecting only fragments of a larger, incomprehensible reality. Quote 32. In our approach to the Bible, the essential is always to regain from the deviations the truth that is always the same, though it is never objectively, definitively present. Engaging with the Bible requires a constant effort to rediscover the underlying eternal truth that persists through various historical and cultural deviations. While this truth remains consistent, it is never fully or objectively available. Rather, it must be approached through personal interpretation and reflection, always remaining elusive and fluid. Quote 33. Biblical religion is distinguished by its abundance of contradiction, polar tension, dialectic. The Bible is filled with contradictions and opposing forces, which are central to its religious and philosophical richness. These contradictions are not flaws, but necessary elements that create a dynamic tension, allowing the text to engage deeply with the complexity of human existence and the divine. Quote 34. The Christ within me is not exclusively bound up with the historical Jesus Christ, and Jesus as Christ, as the God-man, is a myth. This statement separates the spiritual essence of Christ from the historical figure of Jesus. It suggests that the Christ-like spirit is not confined to one person or historical moment, and that viewing Jesus as the God-man is part of a mythological framework. This interpretation challenges traditional religious doctrine while emphasizing the universal presence of the divine spirit. Quote 35. We call this thinking anti-philosophy when it represents and conceives itself as philosophy, and when it is recognized by others as philosophy. Anti-philosophy presents itself as a form of philosophy, but fundamentally opposes the core tenets of true philosophical inquiry. It is a counterfeit version of philosophy that, while using the language and appearance of philosophy, rejects the genuine search for truth. This type of thinking distorts the philosophical process and leads individuals away from authentic self-discovery and reflection. Unbelief, quote 36, lives in illusion, in isolated realities, in world systems. Unbelief, as defined here, is the rejection of transcendence and the acceptance of only immanent, material realities. This leads to a fragmented understanding of the world, where one becomes lost in isolated perceptions and construct systems that attempt to capture the entirety of existence, but ultimately fail. Such unbelief does not touch the core of being, resulting in an illusory grasp of reality. Quote 37. Sympathy with them, possession with the demon, gives its irrational impetus to the theory justified by demonology, that the forces I follow are necessary. In demonological thinking, individuals submit to irrational forces, believing them to be essential and necessary powers that control their lives. This mindset leads people to align themselves with these destructive or chaotic forces, justifying their actions as driven by forces beyond their control. Such a worldview entraps individuals in a cycle of irrationality and powerlessness. Quote 38. The deification of man dishonors man by making things easy for him. Elevating a human being to the status of a god diminishes the true nature of humanity. It simplifies the complexities of existence by offering a tangible object of worship, allowing individuals to avoid the deeper challenge of confronting their own limitations and the hidden nature of the divine. True growth comes from facing the difficulties of life without relying on human idols. Quote 39. Nihilism can only exist in one who lives by impulses of vitality, love of life, will to power. Nihilism, despite its rejection of meaning and truth, paradoxically requires a certain passion for life and a drive for power to sustain itself. Without the energy derived from the will to live and act, nihilism would collapse into despair. This contradiction highlights that even those who deny all meaning still rely on fundamental human impulses that give their lives a sense of movement and purpose. Quote 40. The nihilistic idea justifies me in this, tells me that I am right. Nihilism provides a sense of justification for those who feel emotionally or spiritually empty. It validates their experience of meaninglessness and affirms that their perception of a void is an accurate reflection of reality. In this way, nihilism becomes a lens through which one sees the world, confirming that there is no deeper truth or purpose. Quote 41. Nihilism is intolerable. It seeks evasions in demonology and deification of man. Nihilism, with its inherent emptiness, is unbearable for most people. To escape its overwhelming void, individuals often turn to beliefs such as demonology or the deification of humans, seeking meaning or power in supernatural forces, or elevating certain people to godlike status. These evasions provide temporary relief from nihilism, but remain entangled in its pervasive atmosphere. Quote 42. Truth is the primal source of our thinking and the measure of the false. Truth forms the foundation of human thought and serves as the benchmark against which falsehoods are measured. It is the guiding principle from which all meaningful reflection and inquiry arise, and without it, thought loses its coherence. The pursuit of truth allows for the identification and rejection of false ideas that deviate from this essential core. Quote 43. Philosophy must not be confused with this ontological perversion of philosophical elucidation. Philosophy, in its truest form, seeks to understand being in its entirety without reducing it to simplistic, ontological frameworks. When philosophy becomes entangled in rigid ontological categories, it distorts its purpose and misses the open-ended nature of true philosophical inquiry, which remains constantly in search of the comprehensive and never claims to offer final answers. Quote 44. Philosophical thought grows out of the comprehensive. Anti-philosophy stands always on the solid ground of a particularity and objectivity that it chooses at will. Philosophy is rooted in a holistic understanding of existence, always striving to encompass the broadest possible view. In contrast, anti-philosophy selectively focuses on specific, narrow aspects of reality, presenting them as if they were absolute truths. This narrowness restricts true understanding and limits the expansive pursuit of wisdom inherent in philosophical thought. Quote 45. Philosophy strives to apprehend eternal truth. Is this truth not always the same, the one and whole truth? Philosophy seeks to understand an eternal, unchanging truth. However, this truth cannot be fully grasped or held in a definitive form. The nature of truth is such that it only reveals itself through time, and we, as humans, can only perceive glimpses of it in fleeting moments. Our lives are a journey toward truth, but we never fully possess it. Quote 46. But is life for the future the essential import of our work? I do not believe so, for we serve the future only insofar as we realize the present. The primary focus of life is not to serve the future, but to live fully in the present. The future is shaped by how we live now, and by engaging deeply with the present moment, we create a foundation for what is to come. Philosophy helps us connect with the eternal present, which is where truth manifests, rather than being solely preoccupied with what lies ahead. Quote 47. Today we can attempt, in the light of the past, to achieve awareness of the specific conditions that determine our lives and the future. By reflecting on history and the present moment, we can gain a deeper understanding of the forces shaping our world and what lies ahead. The conditions of our lives, from technology to societal transformations, are crucial for comprehending both the challenges and the possibilities that face humanity. This awareness is necessary for navigating the future with wisdom and insight. Quote 48. Philosophy seeks to find a basis on which death is to be sure not intellectually accepted, but born in the turmoil of suffering, not with stoicism, but with a loving and confident imperturbability. Philosophy does not seek to merely accept death on an intellectual level, but aims to help us endure it with a calm and loving spirit, even in the midst of suffering. It encourages us to face mortality not with indifference, but with a profound inner strength that comes from understanding life's deeper meaning. This allows for a peaceful acceptance of death, grounded in confidence and love. Quote 49. Today our task is to find in existence itself a new foundation for reason. In the modern world, philosophy must redefine and rediscover reason by grounding it in the realities of existence. As traditional structures of meaning and reason have been challenged, it becomes necessary to build a new foundation for rational thought that aligns with the spiritual and existential insights of thinkers like Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and Dostoevsky. This new foundation is essential for navigating the complexities of contemporary life. Quote 50. The prophets who spoke thus desired to awaken their people and later all men. They had but one counsel, to obey God by leading a pure, ethical life. The ancient prophets aimed to awaken their communities to the importance of living an ethical life in obedience to God. They saw the unfolding events around them as guided by divine will, and their call was not for political alliances or power, but for spiritual and moral awakening. The essence of their message was that true meaning lies in righteousness and adherence to God's commandments, not in worldly power. Quote 51. Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, in their days seized with clairvoyance and horror at the course of mankind, are today still essential for our fundamental experience. Kierkegaard and Nietzsche, with their deep insights and foreboding about the direction humanity was heading, remain crucial to understanding our present existential and philosophical dilemmas. Their works are indispensable for anyone who seeks to confront the profound questions of existence, truth, and meaning in a world that continues to grapple with their ideas. Quote 52. Nihilism, as intellectual movement and as historical experience, becomes a transition to a profounder assimilation of historic tradition. Nihilism, while often seen as a destructive force, can serve as a catalyst for deeper engagement with historical traditions. By stripping away outdated norms and beliefs, it opens the way for a more profound understanding and assimilation of past wisdom. It forces us to reassess and reconnect with the timeless truths that endure beyond the collapse of temporary structures. Quote 53. The premise of the technology that is revolutionizing our lives is modern science, but the effects of this science extend much farther. The technological revolution we are experiencing is grounded in modern science, yet its impact reaches far beyond just technological advancements. Science has transformed not only our material existence, but also the way we think, perceive the world, and understand ourselves. It shapes every aspect of contemporary life, from communication to ethics, and its influence will continue to grow. Quote 54. Philosophical faith is inseparable from complete openness to communication, for authentic truth arises only where faiths meet in the presence of the comprehensive. True philosophical inquiry requires openness to dialogue and communication. It is through the meeting of diverse beliefs and perspectives that genuine truth emerges. Without this open exchange, philosophical faith stagnates, as truth is only fully realized when different viewpoints come together in an atmosphere of mutual understanding and respect. The Perennial Scope of Philosophy by Karl Jaspers concludes with a vision of philosophy as an ever-evolving journey that continuously seeks to uncover the depths of human understanding and transcendence. Jaspers stresses that philosophy's true essence lies in its commitment to the search for meaning, a pursuit unbound by strict doctrines, but deeply connected to both individual and collective humanity. He urges readers to recognize philosophy not as a final authority, but as an active and compassionate inquiry that helps bridge the gaps between reason, faith, and existential freedom. Ultimately, Jaspers' work inspires a commitment to philosophical reflection as a path to genuine self-awareness and intellectual liberation.
Curious to dive into the mind of Karl Jaspers? With StudyLab Pro's Book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of the perennial scope of philosophy in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.